this team wants to reduce this to $100, which means you can send this to villages and people can take their scan themselves and then send a text message, which is the attachment of that image, especially if you have broadband communication. And the doctor can look at it, and if the doctor doesn't find it useful, can send you a text message, say, please try scanning again. And you just do it until you get the best image for the doctor. Of course, you can tell right away that these two gentlemen are not medical doctors, they are electronic engineers. Because if they are medical doctors, this would not be the place to check for pregnancy. Not at all. They are really working hard to make. In fact, the Gates Foundation is financing part of their research. Some of these handheld ultrasound devices are being piloted in Africa. This is a pilot in Western Kenya. Similarly, we have again very really significant advances in the area of energy, particularly really new designs of turbines with just a balloon, and that balloon has a turbine incorporated into it, and essentially the wind just turns it around. You can tether it anywhere. Very low cost way of actually providing energy. And the question, this is where the PoliMaT issue comes in, is thinking about the type of material that's highly durable, and also very light. This is a Canadian technology. And the Japanese have come up with a really very simple, ingenious method of just putting a lens, a ring around a wind turbine, and that increases the efficiency of energy extraction from a wind turbine threefold. Very simple idea. In fact, high school kids could actually do that. This is going to be really transformational in that wind turbines are going to be everywhere. And these are all kind of low-cost technologies that are possible because we have these advances in such technology. And one of the consequences of this, especially for Africa, is the infrastructure we are talking about. The importance of starting to build capacity in the engineering sciences, especially training people in Africa to think about production of new products, not just getting increase. So new models of building institutions of higher learning is becoming a big priority for African countries. The second area is this area of growing new businesses, which is the challenge for PoliMaT at the moment. You have a product, yes, then you move from a product to company, and then you sell the company rather than selling the product, which is focusing on growing new businesses as opposed to just nurturing old ones. And then the big thing that's happening in Africa is really this area of creation of regional markets. In that Africa is 54 or so small economies separated, and there are these regional bodies that are focusing all their time coordinating among countries, creating a common infrastructure. Matteo made reference to this common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, which is 19 countries from Libya, Egypt, all the way to some of the Southern African countries like Swaziland and the Indian Ocean countries. This is a significant investments, political investment among African countries to create larger markets. So that when you go into any of the African countries today, it's a gateway into the rest of the region. This is why the potential really lies. And I'll give you one interesting kind of diplomatic example here. The Japanese, who have always had the engineers sitting in Nairobi, in the Japanese embassy in Nairobi, just moved the Japanese engineers to sit in Arusha, which is the headquarters of the East African community, which is the 5 East African countries, because they are thinking now about East Africa as a region rather than individual countries. About a month ago, when President Obama released his new strategy on Africa, there was one sentence which was one of his areas of emphasis for Africa is going to be regional integration, which is working in groups of countries rather than individual countries. So if you look at the US strategy towards Africa, you find that they're focusing on 5 countries. And you wonder why 5 countries? Because they're seeing those 5 countries as gateways into the rest of the continent, and not just a few countries that they're collaborating with. And this is where really the opportunities opportunities lie in terms of thinking about how to connect with Africa. Let me just I'll conclude here by just mentioning also that in addition to these changes in Africa, the African countries are also starting to think differently about their own diplomatic representation. You take a country like Ethiopia, for example. Ethiopia has 3 ambassadors in the United States. The first ambassador is bilateral relations between the US and Ethiopia. The second is the Ethiopian ambassador to the United Nations. And they have a third ambassador based in Washington. The job of that ambassador is to connect with the Ethiopians in the diaspora, Ethiopians who live in the United States. And a large part of that connection is in fact building scientific and technological collaboration between the US and Ethiopia. And many more African countries are starting to think along those lines. Kenya, for example, completely redid its foreign policy. We used to have a very easy and elegant foreign policy, which is we just sat there and we watched the UK, and whatever the UK did, we did it. And we called our policy the wait and see policy, which is wait and see the United Kingdom. And then we realized, and when the UK joined the European Union, we said, we are not watching them anymore. So we have reinvented our policy around the principles of economic diplomacy, which is diplomats that are being appointed by virtue of their economic experience, a whole new crop of diplomats, because they are trained in business issues. We are rethinking where we post them, so they are being posted in key areas where we have economic influence. And this is really the way Africa is starting to rethink its place in the global economy through science and technology. And so this is really the message I wanted to leave you with, which is that what you are doing here as a group of 85 or so scientists is of great interest to the African countries because they are searching for areas of partnerships. But the research is not sufficient. You need to think about connection with companies that already have a presence in Africa that could be outlets in terms of products coming from the research, where you connect with the companies that already have marketing capability that can get the products out as quickly as possible. This is something I have to say because I also follow a lot very closely what's happening, what the Asian countries are doing. The Asian countries are doing a lot more of that, connecting the research institutes with big companies across China, across Taiwan, across Korea, than in fact the Western countries are doing at the moment. And I would like to see more of this happen because it changes the dynamics in that it's no longer just access to raw materials. It's really now exchanges through knowledge because the Africans are looking for knowledge so they can add value to the raw materials. And that opens up new forms of partnerships. I'm sorry I talked for too long, but I think I'll stop here and take any questions. And preferably there are no questions because you have homework. I'm not going to let you. Did you take a list of everybody's name who is here? Because I need a list of everybody who came here because I want to check whether you actually nominated. So I'm happy to take any questions. You can ask me to leave.
No, not yet. Not yet. The refreshments are on the way. So some questions.
Yes.
You talked about the role of innovation for Africa. And when I looked at the examples, all of them are very dependent on limited resources. And also in your talks, you very much emphasize the potential as Africa as a market. That if you combine technology which are based on non-renewable resources for all the mobile devices, you need a lot of them. Do you think that that's the perspective of Africa to get the same level, the same resource-dependent economy as Europe, as we here have in the Western countries, or do you think you go a step ahead, looking what other forms of economy are possible in Africa so that we can overcome this fault we are doing?
Yes, that's a very good point. I actually use, another way I think about mobile phones, in that if you were to provide the same level of connectivity that Africa has using mobile phones, using landlines, you'll use a lot of copper to start with. Secondly, you'll have to use a lot of poles, telephone poles, to get the same level of connectivity. You need a lot of labor and energy to build all this in the traditional telecommunications infrastructure. So if you look at the mobile phones, in fact, one of the biggest benefits of mobile phone for Africa is being able to leapfrog ecologically, in that the ecological footprint of using mobile phones is much smaller compared to the traditional forms of communication. So and that part has never been studied. I don't know if anybody has actually done the calculations of what it would cost to provide the same level of connectivity using old telephone systems. You'll wipe out probably a large part of the Congo forest just getting telephone poles to be able to do it, and not to mention the energy of transporting it. So there we have had a real leapfrogging, which is ecological leapfrogging. And this is why I'm interested in the work that's going on here, is that you can get, if you take, say, the microcaps technology, it's estimated that roughly 25% of the nitrogen that is applied in fertilizer basically leaches into the soil, not to mention that the plant will take only a small proportion of it. And then 80 to 90% of phosphorus gets bonded with the soil. So whenever the soil moves, if there is erosion, you actually lose it. This has huge ecological implications in terms of lowering significantly the footprint of applying fertilizer. So the first step that I see is just introducing ecological efficiency in the use of existing technologies. And then you can start to move to the next level where you're really designing technologies with ecology as a starting point. And I've been part of a design program. I've been serving on the board of trustees of the One Laptop Per Child. This is a project created at MIT to get low-cost computers to children worldwide. And right from the beginning, when we started designing the laptop, we had ecological parameters for designing the laptop. Like we went for flash memory, basically solid-state memories instead of disk drive. And the consequence of that is that it has very, very low. It's a 2-watt computer as compared to maybe 20 watts, which is the most efficient computer can get at the moment. And so we found out, in fact, in working on that laptop, that if you design for the poorest people on Earth, your energy and ecological footprint is going to be much, much lower. And then you can make those products available, in fact, globally as well. So my view is that the products being designed out of an African environment are going to be ecologically a lot more efficient. There's one last comment I wanted to make on mobile phones, which is really also has ecological implications, is that if you look at Kenya, for example, it has one of the highest uptake of solar energy technologies, photovoltaic panels. It's actually driven by telephone towers, because the telephone towers are powered by solar energy. So we start to see mobile communication, in fact, driving renewable energy technologies in ways that hadn't been anticipated, because you couldn't send cables there. That's why I see, in fact, some people have argued that the real possibility for ecological